give me the same thing. Only different. A screenwriter's daily conundrum is how to avoid cliché. You can be near the cliché, you can dance around it, you can run right up to it and almost embrace it. But at the last second you must turn away. You must give it a twist. And insisting on those twists, defying that inner voice that says, "Oh, well, no one will notice," is a universal struggle that good storytellers have been fighting forever. To quote the studio executive who first blurted out this rule to me, Sam Goldwyn, during a development meeting, "Give me the same thing. Only different." Bless his pointy little head. In every aspect of creation, from the idea, to the way characters speak, to the scenes themselves, putting a fresh spin on it, whatever it is what we do every day. But to know how to avoid the cliché, to know what tradition you are pushing forward, begins with knowing what that tradition is. A full-fledged knowledge of hundreds of movies, and especially those which your movie is like, is required. Yet surprising as it seems for people who are interested in pursuing a career in movies, I am shocked to find how many up-and-comers cannot even quote from movies in their own genre, much less movies generally. Trust me, all the big guys can. Listen to Spielberg or Scorsese talk about movies. They know and can quote from hundreds. And I don't mean quote as in recite lines from, I mean quote as in explain how each movie works. Movies are intricately made emotion machines. They are Swiss watches of precise gears and spinning wheels that make them tick. You have to be able to take them apart and put them back together again. In the dark. In your sleep. And your knowledge of a few movies you like is not enough. It is also not enough to know all the movies of the past 5 years. You have to go back, see the lineage of many types of movies, know what movie begat what in the line of succession, and how the art was advanced by each. Which leads me to the subject of genre. You are about to embark on the next step of writing a successful screenplay, and that is the categorizing of your movie idea. But no. You think, my movie is new. It's like nothing ever seen before. I will not be put into a category. Sorry. Too late. You can't tell me any idea that isn't like one, or dozens, found in the movie canon. Trust me, your movie falls into a category. And that category has rules that you need to know. Because to explode the clichés, to give us the same thing, only different, you have to know what genre your movie is part of, and how to invent the twists that avoid pat elements. If you can do that, you have a better chance to sell. And, by the way, everyone, and I mean everyone in Hollywood, already does this. So why not know what they know? What is it? Most like? So now you've got your logline. You've followed my advice, you've gone out and test-pitched your dozen or so victims, you've got their responses and adjusted accordingly, and now your one-liner is just shining there so brightly. You know you've got yourself a winner. You're ready to type fade in, right? Wrong. I'm holding you back because before you start writing I want you to think a little bit about the question after what is it? And that's what is it? Most like? I return again to the example of you and your friends on Saturday night. You've pitched them their movie choices, and they've picked a couple. And now they want to know more about what they can expect to see when they plunk down their $10. Okay, so it's comedy. But what kind? This situation is why you hear so many bad movie pitches in Hollywood. They're the ones, I admit, that I've used as shorthand, but which I really hate and don't advise you to use. These are the types of pitches people make fun of, and rightly so. It's X-Men meets Cannonball Run, the nervous pitcher will say. Or it's Die Hard. In a bowling alley. The ones that combine 2 or more movies are especially irksome. You sit there, trying to imagine how it's Heathers meets Smash really works. What is that? Spoiled teenage girls join the army? A medical team is airlifted to a high school to save kids who are shooting each other? What? And odds are all the pitcher is doing is grabbing 2 hit movies and hoping there's some element in there that someone will like. Please note, you never use bombs to describe these mad doctor experiments. It's never Ishtar meets Howard the Duck, an example which tells you exactly how bad a technique this is. And yet, I admit I do it. The reason categorizing your movie is a good idea is that it's important for you, the screenwriter, To know what type of movie you're writing. Of the many ways to get lost while in the middle of writing a screenplay, this is the most common. When I'm writing a movie, when Steven Spielberg is writing a movie, referencing other movies, looking for clues of plotting and character within the genre, is commonplace. And thus, when you are stuck in your story or when you're preparing to write, you will screen a dozen movies that are like the one you're working on to get clues about why certain plot elements are important, why they work or don't, and where you can change the cliché into something fresh. There are 10 movie genres that have proven to be good places to start this process. That's all they are, a place to start. We'll get into how to move past them next. As I search for matches in this game of genre gin rummy, do I look for runs or pairs? I'm interested in creating categories of movies that I can add more movies to every year. And I think within these 10 story types, you can stick just about every motion picture ever made. You can make up your own categories, you can add others to this list, but I hope you won't need to. You will also note that nowhere in this list do I have standard genre types, such as romantic comedy, epic, or biography, because those names don't really tell me anything about what the story is. And that's what I need to know. The 10 types of movies I have categorized here are: Monster in the House, of which Jaws, Tremors, Alien, The Exorcist, Fatal Attraction, and Panic Room are examples. Golden Fleece. This is the category of movie best exemplified by Star Wars, The Wizard of Oz, Planes, Trains and Automobiles, Back to the Future, and most heist movies. Out of the Bottle. This incorporates films like Liar, Liar, Bruce Almighty, Love Potion, Freaky Friday, Flubber, and even my own little kid hit from Disney, Blank Check. Dude with a Problem. This is a genre that ranges in style, tone, and emotional substance from Breakdown and Die Hard to Titanic and Schindler's List. Rites of Passage. Every change of life story from I.O. to Ordinary People to Days of Wine and Roses makes this category. Buddy Love. This genre is about more than the buddy movie dynamic as seen in cop buddy pictures, Dumb and Dumber, and Rain Man, but also every love story ever made. Why Done It? Who Cares Who, It's Why That Counts. Includes Chinatown, China Syndrome, JFK and The Insider. The Fool Triumphant. One of the oldest story types, this category includes Being There, Forrest Gump, Dave, The Jerk, Amadeus, and the work of silent clowns like Chaplin, Keaton, and Lloyd. Institutionalized. Just like it sounds, this is about groups, Animal House, MASH, One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, and family sagas such as American Beauty and The Godfather. Superhero. This isn't just about the obvious tales you'd think of, like Superman and Batman, but also includes Dracula, Frankenstein, even Gladiator and A Beautiful Mind. Are you thoroughly confused? Do you doubt my sanity when I tell you that Schindler's List and Die Hard are in the same category? Are you looking at me kinda funny when I tell you that buddy movies are just love stories in disguise? Good. Then let's dig further into the wonderful world of genre. Monster in the House. What do Jaws, The Exorcist, and Alien have in common? They're examples of the genre I call Monster in the House. This genre has a long track record and was probably the first tale man ever told. It has 2 working parts, a monster, a house. And when you add people into that house, desperate to kill the monster, you've got a movie type so primal that it translates to everyone, everywhere. It's the type of movie that I like to say, you can pitch to a caveman. It's not about being dumb, it's about being primal. And everyone understands the simple, primal commandment, don't get eaten. That's why this genre is responsible for so many worldwide hits and franchises. You can probably run most of these films without the soundtrack and still get it. Jurassic Park, The Nightmare on Elm Street, Friday the 13th, and Scream series, Tremors and its sequels, and every haunted house and ghost story ever told are all examples of this genre. Even films without supernatural elements, like Fatal Attraction, starring Glenn Close as the monster, fall into this category. And it's clear from such movies as Arachnophobia, Lake Placid, and Deep Blue Sea, if you don't know the rules of Monster in the House, you fail. The rules, to me, are simple. The house must be a confined space, a beach town, a spaceship, a futuristic Disneyland with dinosaurs, a family unit. There must be sin committed, usually greed, monetary or carnal, prompting the creation of a supernatural monster that comes like an avenging angel to kill those who have committed that sin and spare those who realize what that sin is. The rest is run and hide. And putting a new twist on both the monster's powers, and the way we say boo, is the job of the screenwriter who wants to add to the illustrious limb of this family tree of movies. We can see a bad example of this category in Arachnophobia, the film starring Jeff Daniels and John Goodman. Bad monster, a little spider. Not much supernatural there. Not all that scary either, you step on it and it dies. Also, no house. At any given moment, the residents of Arachnophobia can say check please and be on the next Greyhound out of town. Where is the tension there? Because the filmmakers behind Arachnophobia violated the rules of Monster in the House, they wound up with a mishmash. Is it a comedy or a drama? Are we really supposed to be scared? I could write a whole book on the rules of Monster in the House, but you don't need me to have a meat film festival in your own home and discover these nuances for yourself. And if you're writing a screenplay that falls into this genre, I suggest you do just that. I want to make clear that, as with all the genres to be discussed here, this is a category that has not, been exhausted. There is always a way to do a new one. But you must give it a fresh twist to be successful. You must break from cliché. You must give us the same thing, only differ. Anyone who thinks there isn't new territory to mine in the Monster in their House genre, should think of the myth of the Minotaur. Great monster, a half-man/half-bull. Great house, a maze where the condemned are sent to die. But the ancient Greek hack who eyed this successful story and said, it's over. Genre's dead. I can't top that. Never envisioned Glenn Close with a bad perm and a boiled rabbit. The Golden Fleece. The quest myth has been one of the more winning tales told around the campfire since, well, forever. And if your screenplay can in any way be categorized as a road movie, then you must know the rules of a genre I call the Golden Fleece. The name comes from the myth of Jason and the Argonauts, and yet it's always about the same thing. A hero goes on the road in search of one thing and winds up discovering something else, himself. Thus Wizard of Oz, Planes, Train and Automobiles, Star Wars, Road Trip, and Back to the Future are all basically the same movie. Scary, huh? Like the twists of any story, the milestones of the Golden Fleece are the people and incidents that our hero or heroes encounter along the way. Because it's episodic, it seems to not be connected, but it must be. The theme of every Golden Fleece movie is internal growth. How the incidents affect the hero is, in fact, the plot. It is the way we know that we are truly making forward progress. It's not the mileage we're racking up that makes a good Golden Fleece, it's the way the hero changes as he goes. And forcing those milestones to mean something to the hero is your job. As it turns out, I have been working on a Golden Fleece with my current writing partner, the amazingly successful and talented Sheldon Bull. And we have been discussing Golden Fleece movies a lot, naturally. Since our film is a comedy, we've looked at planes, trains, and automobiles, and discussed the character dynamics of Rain Man, Road Trip, and even Animal House, believe it or not. In an effort to get a handle on what is basically the story of a kid who heads home after being unjustly kicked out of military school and discovers that his parents have moved without telling him. It's basically Home Alone on the road. Sorry. It's a bad habit. The adjustments we are making aren't about the adventure, which I find hilarious, but about what each incident means to our kid hero. In many ways what these adventures are is irrelevant. Whatever fun set pieces our hero encounters must be shaded to deliver milestones of growth for our kid lead. We always come back to that Golden Fleece truism that can be found in the Odyssey, Gulliver's Travels, and any number of successful road stories through the ages. It's not the incidents, it's what the hero learns about himself from those incidents that makes the story work. This genre is also where all heist movies are found. Any quest, mission, or treasure locked in a castle that is to be approached by an individual or a group falls into the Golden Fleece category and has the same rules. Very often the mission becomes secondary to other, more personal, discoveries, the twists and turns of the plot are suddenly less important than the meaning derived from the heist, as Ocean's 11, The Dirty Dozen, and The Magnificent Seven prove. Out of the bottle. I wish I had my own money. This is what our character Preston Waters states in the movie Colby Carr and I wrote and sold to Disney that became a kids' mini-hit called Blank Check. And Preston will, in fact, soon get his own money, $1 million to be exact, with which he will happily run amok. This type of wish fulfillment is so common because it's a big part of the human psyche. I wish I had is probably the single most frequently spoken prayer since Adam. And stories that tell a good what-if tale that exploits these wish fulfillment fantasies are good, primal, easy for a caveman to understand stories, which is why there's so many of them. And why they're so successful. The comedy hit Bruce Almighty is an example of this genre. In fact, the flexible Jim Carrey has also been the star of another out-of-the-bottle classic, The Mask. It doesn't have to be God who bestows the magic. It can be a thing, like The Mask or a magic VW named Herbie and Disney's The Love Bug, or a formula that you invent to make the opposite sex fall in love with you as in Love Potion starring Sandra Bullock, or magic silly putty that can save your teaching career as in Flubber starring Robin Will. The name Out of the Bottle should evoke the image of a genie who is summoned out of the bottle to grant his master's wish, but it doesn't have to be magic to be part of this wish fulfillment genre. In Blank Check, there is no magic that gets Preston his $1 million. Sure, it's a long shot, and Colby and I went out of our way to make it seem reality-based. But it doesn't matter. Whether it's by divine intervention or luck or a magic being who enters the scene, it's the same device. For some reason or other, usually because we like the guy or gal and think they deserve it, their wish is granted and their lives begin to change. On the flip side of Out of the Bottle, but very much the same category, is the curse aspect of wishing. These are comeuppance tales. Another Jim Carrey movie, Liar, Liar, is a good example. Are we seeing a pattern here about what stars consistently fit best into what Jungian archetypes? Same setup, same device. A kid wishes his lying lawyer father would start telling nothing but the truth, and lo, it happens. Suddenly Jim Carrey can't tell a lie, on the day of a big case in which lying is, and has been, his best weapon. Jim's going to have to change his ways and grow if he is to survive, and by doing so, he gets what he really wants in the first place. The respect of his wife and son. Another comeuppance tale is Freaky Friday, both the Jodie Foster version and the updated Lindsay Lohan take. But there are many of these, such as All of Me with Steve Martin and Groundhog Day starring another famous wise guy, Bill Murray. The rules of Out of the Bottle then are this: if it's a wish fulfillment tale, the hero must be a put-upon Cinderella who is so under the thumb of those around him that we are really rooting for anyone, or anything, to get him a little happiness. And yet, so the rules tell us and human nature dictates, we don't want to see anyone, even the most underdog character, succeed for too long. And eventually, the hero must learn that magic isn't everything. It's better to be just like us members of the audience, because in the end, we know this will never happen to us. Thus a lesson must be in the offing, a good moral must be included at the end. If it's a comeuppance tale version of Out of the Bottle, then the opposite setup is applied. Here's a guy or gal who needs a swift kick in the behind. And yet, there must be something redeemable about them. This is a little trickier to pull off and must include a save the cat scene at the outset, one where we know that even though this guy or gal is a jerk, there is something in them that's worth saving. So in the course of the tale, they get the benefit of the magic, even though it's a curse, and in the end, they triumph. Dude with a problem. This genre is defined by the phrase, an ordinary guy finds himself in extraordinary circumstances. And when you think about it, it's another of the most popular, most primal situations we can imagine for ourselves. All of us consider ourselves to be an ordinary guy or gal, and thus we are drawn into sympathetic alignment with the hero of this type of tale from the get-go. Into this just an ordinary day beginning comes something extraordinary. My wife's building is taken over by terrorists with ponytails, Die Hard, Nazis start hauling away my Jewish friends, Schindler's List. A robot from the future, with an accent, comes and tells me he is here to kill me and my unborn child. The Terminator, the ship in which we are traveling, hits an iceberg and begins to sink without enough lifeboats for everyone on board. Titanic. These, my friends, are problems. Big, primal problems. So how are you, the ordinary guy, going to handle them? Like Monster in the House, this genre also has two very simple working parts: a dude, meaning an average guy or gal just like ourselves, and a problem, something that this average guy must dig deep inside himself to conquer. From these simple components, an infinite number of mix and match situations can bloom and grow. The more average the guy, the bigger the challenge, as movies like Breakdown with Kurt Russell demonstrate. In Breakdown, Kurt has no superpowers or skills, no police training. Nada. But he shares with diehards Bruce Willis the same domestic agenda all average guys understand. Save the wife that he loves. Whether our hero is skilled or not, it's the relative size of the challenge that makes these stories work. And one rule of thumb is, the badder the bad guy, the greater the heroics. So make the bad guy as bad as possible, always, for the bigger the problem, the greater the odds for our dude to overcome. And no matter who the bad guy is, the dude triumphs from his willingness to use his individuality to outsmart the far more powerful forces aligned against him. Rites of passage. Remember the time you were awkwardly going through puberty and that cute girl you had a crush on didn't know you were alive? Remember that birthday party when you turned 40 and your husband came to you and asked for a divorce? These painful examples of life transition resonate with us because we have all, to a greater or lesser degree, gone through them. And growing pain stories register because they are the most sensitive times in our lives. It's what makes us human, and what makes for excellent, poignant, and even hilarious storytelling. Isn't Dudley Moore in 10 the funniest midlife crisis put on film? But whether it's drama or comedy, rites of passage tales are of a type. And all have the same rules. All movies are about change, so to say that rites of passage stories document a change is missing the point. These are tales of pain and torment, but usually from an outside force, life. Sure, it's about the choices we've made. But the monster attacking us is often unseen, vague, or one which we can't get a handle on simply because we can't name it. Lost Weekend, Days of Wine and Roses, 28 Days starring Sandra Bullock. And When a Man Loves a Woman starring Meg Ryan all tell stories about coming to grips with drugs and alcohol. Likewise, puberty, midlife crisis, old age, romantic breakup, and grieving stories, like those about getting over the death of a loved one. Such as ordinary people, also have the same thing in common. In a good rites of passage tale, everybody's in on the joke except the person who's going through it, the story's hero. And only the experience can offer a solution. In essence, whether the take is comedic or dramatic, the monster sneaks up on the beleaguered hero and the story is that hero's slow realization of who and what that monster is. In the end, these tales are about surrendering, the victory won by giving up to forces stronger than ourselves. The end point is acceptance of our humanity and the moral of the story is always the same, that's life. Another Blake Edwards movie. Between that, 10, and Days of Wine and Roses, Blake Edwards appears to like and do well in this genre. If your movie idea can in any way be considered a rites of passage tale, then these films are fair game for screening. Like the steps of acceptance outlined in Elizabeth Kubler-Ross's On Death and Dying. The structure of this story type is charted in the hero's grudging acceptance of the forces of nature that he cannot control or comprehend, and the victory comes with the hero's ability to ultimately smile. Buddy love. The classic buddy story is a type that I think of as a creation of the movie age. Though there were a few great buddy tales, Don Quixote, for example, this category really didn't take off as a story form until the dawn of cinema. My theory is that the buddy movie was invented by a screenwriter who realized that his hero had no one to react to. There was just this big, empty space where interior monologue and description is found in fiction. And the screenwriter suddenly thought, what if his hero had someone to debate important story issues with? Thus the classic buddy movie was born, and from Laurel and Hardy to Bob Hope and Bing Crosby to Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid to the antics of Wayne's World, both 1 and 2. It has become a movie staple. Two guys talking to each other like 48 Hours, Two girls talking to each other like Thelma and Louise. Two fish talking to each other like Finding Nemo. They all work because stories of me and my best friend will always resonate. Again, they're very human and based on universal circumstances. These are stories you can pitch to a caveman and both he and his buddy will get it. The secret of a good buddy movie is that it is actually a love story in disguise. And, likewise, all love stories are just buddy movies with the potential for sex. Bringing Up Baby, Pat and Mike, Woman of the Year, 2 Weeks Notice, How to Lose a Guy in 10 Days are, genre-wise just sophisticated Laurel and Hardy movies where one of the buddies is wearing a skirt. And yet the rules for these, drama or comedy, sex or no sex, are the same. At first the buddies hate each other. Where would they have to go if they didn't? But their adventure together brings out the fact that they need each other. They are, in essence, incomplete halves of a whole. And realizing this leads to even more conflict. Who can tolerate needing anybody? Penultimately, the all is lost moment, more on this in Chapter 4, which occurs toward the end of each of these stories is, separation, a fight, a goodbye and good riddance. That is, in reality, none of these. It's just two people who can't stand the fact that they don't live as well without each other, who will have to surrender their egos to win. And when the final curtain comes down, they have done just that. Often, as in Rain Man, one of the buddies is the story's hero and will do all or most of the changing, i.e., Tom Cruise, while the other buddy acts as a catalyst of that change and will do slight or no changing, i.e., Dustin Hoffman. I have been in many story discussions about this dynamic. Whose story is it? Is what it very often boils down to. Lethal Weapon is like that to an extent. It's Danny Glover's story. Mel Gibson is the agent of change. And though Mel will not be suicidal by the story's end, it's Danny Glover whose transformation we care most about. These catalyst buddy love tales, in which a being comes into one's life, affects it, and leaves, is a subset of the buddy love dynamic and an important one to keep in mind. Many Boy and His Dog tales are like this, including E.T. If you're writing a buddy movie or love story, either drama or comedy, the dynamics of the buddy love structure are a must-to-know. Sit down with a dozen of these, pop them into your DVD player, and get ready to be amazed by how similar they all are. Is this stealing? Is Sandra Bullock ripping off Katharine Hepburn? Should Cary Grant's estate sue Hugh Grant for copyright infringement? Of course not. It's just good storytelling. And the beats are the same for a reason. Because they always work. Why done it? We all know that evil lurks in the hearts of men. Greed happens. Murder happens. And unseen evildoers are responsible for it all. But the who is never as interesting as the why. Unlike the Golden Fleece, a good whodunit isn't about the hero changing, it's about the audience discovering something about human nature they did not think was possible before the crime was committed and the case began. Like Citizen Kane, a classic whodunit, the story is about seeking the innermost chamber of the human heart and discovering something unexpected, something dark and often unattractive, and the answer to the question, why? Chinatown is perhaps the best whodunit ever made, and a textbook example of great screenwriting. It's one of those movies that you can see 1,000 times and drive deeper into smaller and smaller rooms of the Nautilus shell with each viewing. What makes it a great whodunit is what makes all classic whodunits work. From China Syndrome to All the President's Men to JFK to Mystic River, every detective story or social drama, these stories walk on the dark side. They take us to the shadowy part of the street. And the rules are simple. We and the audience are the detectives, ultimately. While we have a surrogate or surrogates on screen doing the work for us. It's we who must ultimately sift through the information, and we who must be shocked by what we find. If your movie is about this type of discovery, take a look at the great whodunits. Note how a surrogate on screen represents us. And see why the investigation into the dark side of humanity is often an investigation into ourselves in an MC. Escher kaleidoscopic reptile eating its own tail kinda way. That's what a good whodunit does, it turns the X-ray machine back on ourselves and asks, are we this evil? The Fool triumphant. The Fool is an important character in myth and legend and has been forever. On the outside, he's just the village idiot, but further examination reveals him to be the wisest among us. Being such an underdog gives the fool the advantage of anonymity, and also makes everyone underestimate his ability, allowing him or her the chance to ultimately shine. The fool in the movies goes back to Chaplin, Keaton, and Lloyd. Little men, silly men, overlooked men, who triumph by luck and pluck and the specialness that comes from not giving up despite the odds. In modern movies, Dave, Being There, Amadeus, Forrest Gump, and many of the movies of Steve Martin, Bill Murray, and Ben Stiller come to mind as examples of how this tradition has evolved and why it will always have a place. The operating principle of the fool triumphant is to set the underdog fool against a bigger, more powerful, and often establishment bad guy. Watching a so-called idiot get the go to those society deems to be the winners in life gives us all hope, and pokes fun at the structures we take so seriously in our day-to-day lives. Thus, no establishment is too sacred to be skewered, from the White House, Dave, to success in the business world, the jerk, to the overblown reverence for the importance of our culture, Forrest Gump. The working parts of a fool triumphant movie are simple: an underdog, who is seemingly so inept and so unequipped for life that everyone around him discounts his odds for success, and does so repeatedly in the setup, and an institution for that underdog to attack. Often, the fool has an accomplice, an insider who is in on the joke and can't believe the fool is getting away with his ruse. Salieri in Amadeus, the doctor in Being There, Lieutenant Dan in Forrest Gump. These characters often get the brunt of the slapstick, the guy at the end of the Rube Goldberg chain of events the fool sets into motion, who ultimately gets the pie in the face, like Herbert Lom in The Pink Panther. Their crime is being close to the idiot, seeing him for what he really is, and being stupid enough to try to interfere. Special fools, whether they're in comedies or dramas like Charlie and Awakenings, offer us a glimpse of the life of the outsider. We all feel like that at times, and tales of the fool triumphant give us the vicarious thrill of victory. Institutionalized. Where would we be without each other? And when we band together as a group with a common cause, we reveal the ups and downs of sacrificing the goals of the few for those of the many. Thus, the genre I call institutionalized tells stories about groups, institutions, and families. These stories are special because they both honor the institution and expose the problems of losing one's identity to it. One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest is about a group of mental patients. American Beauty is about a group of modern suburbanites. MASH is about the American military. The Godfather is about a mafia family. Each has a breakout character whose role is to expose the group goal as a fraud. Jack Nicholson, Kevin Spacey, Donald Sutherland, and Al Pacino, respectively, carry this role in these films. The reason I've dubbed these stories institutionalized is that the group dynamic these tales tell is often crazy and even self-destructive. Suicide is painless. The theme song of MASH isn't so much about the insanity of war as the insanity of the herd mentality. When we put on a uniform, be it the uniform of the army or a comfortable cotton shirt with a little polo player over the pocket, we give up who we are to a certain extent. And these movies are all about the pros and cons of putting the group ahead of ourselves. Again, this is a very caveman kind of story. Loyalty to the group sometimes flies in the face of common sense, even survival, but we do it. And we have done it forever. To watch others fight that battle, just like we do every day, is why this genre is so popular. And so primal. Often movies of the institutionalized category will be told from the point of view of a newcomer. He is us, a virgin who is new to this group and who is being brought into it by someone who is more experienced. Jane Fonda in 9 to 5 and Tom Hulce in Animal House are examples. For any world in which the technology, lingo, or rules are not familiar to the average viewer, these characters can be invaluable relays of exposition. They can literally ask how does that work? And allow you to explain the importance to everybody. It's a way to show what is often a crazy world to us civilians. Ultimately, all the stories in this category come down to a question: who's crazier, me or them? All one need do to understand how sacrificing oneself for the group can be an insane proposition is to check out Al Pacino's face at the end of Godfather 2. Here is a guy who has committed suicide for the good of the family and tradition. And look where it got him. It is just as shocking as Kevin Spacey's last-minute discovery in American Beauty and Mirrors, almost exactly, Jack Nicholson's blank post-operative expression in Cuckoo's Nest. Why? Because it's the same movie, with the same message, told in extremely different and moving ways. But they all work for a reason. Because each movie followed the rules. And they gave us the same thing. Only different. Superhero. The superhero genre is the exact opposite of dude with a problem and can best be defined by its opposite definition. An extraordinary person finds himself in an ordinary world. Like Gulliver tied to the beach by the Lilliputians, a superhero tale asks us to lend human qualities, and our sympathy, to a super being, and identify with what it must be like to have to deal with the likes of us little people. No wonder so many brainy geeks and teens read comic books. They don't have far to go to get in sync and identify with what it's like to be so misunderstood. This genre goes beyond stories about guys in capes and tights, however. It is more than the Marvel Universe or the DC Comics characters. Gladiator and A Beautiful Mind, both Russell Crowe vehicles, another, interesting, are good examples of human superheroes that are challenged by the mediocre world around them. In both those films, it is the tiny minds that surround the hero that are the real problem. Don't they get it? Well, no they don't. That's why being special is so difficult. Frankenstein, Dracula, and X-Men are the same in this regard. Ultimately, all superhero tales are about being different, a feeling with which even we Lilliputians can identify. Born into a world he did not create, the superhero must deal with those who are jealous of his unique point of view and superior mind. And from time to time we all feel this way. Anybody who's ever been shot down at the PTA or sneered at for bold thinking in a meeting at work can identify with Frankenstein's monster being chased by an angry mob of mouth-breathers with pitchforks and torches. The problem of how to have sympathy for the likes of millionaire Bruce Wayne or genius Russell Crowe is solved by stressing the pain that goes hand in hand with having these advantages. It's not easy being Bruce Wayne. The poor guy's tortured. And while it might be cheaper to get therapy, if he can afford a bat utility belt, he can certainly pay $150 an hour for a shrink. Bruce Wayne is admirable because he eschews his personal comfort in the effort to give back to the community. This is so often why the first movie in a superhero series succeeds and ones that follow don't, such as RoboCop 2. The creation myth that begins each superhero franchise stresses sympathy for the superhero's plight. Once established, filmmakers forget to recreate that sympathy and draw us into the human side of the superhero again. Spider-Man 2 avoids this mistake and, not surprisingly, was a smash hit. In truth, we will never truly understand the superhero. Indeed, our identification with him must come from sympathy for the plight of being misunderstood. If you are writing a superhero movie, a wide range of tales are available for dissection. It's a long-standing story type for a reason. It gives flight to our greatest fantasies about our potential, while tempering those fantasies with a dose of reality. Hollywood's dirty little secret. I'm sure having reviewed this list of genres you're not only seeing why so many movies are structurally identical to others, but have had many eureka moments when you're convinced that outright stealing has been perpetrated. And guess what? You're not so wrong to think that. Look at Point Break starring Patrick Swayze, then look at Fast and Furious. Yes, it's the same movie almost beat for beat. But one is about surfing, the other is about hot cars. Is that stealing? Is that cheating? Now look at The Matrix and compare and contrast it with the Disney/Pixar hit Monsters Incorporated. Yup. Same movie. And there's a million more examples. Who Framed Roger Rabbit? Is Chinatown? Blank Check is very similar to Home Alone. In some instances, the stealing is conscious. In others, it's just coincidence. But very often the reason it happens is that story templates work, and they work for a reason that must be repeated. Each of these movies is an example of successful storytelling. Several are huge hits. Do you think anyone is complaining that Fast and Furious ripped off the story beats of Point Break? Did anyone notice but you and me? Doubtful. The point I'm trying to get across here is, it works. And it works for a reason. because the laws of physics that govern storytelling work every time, in every situation. Your job is to learn why it works and how these story cogs fit together. When it seems like you're stealing, don't. When it feels like a cliché, give it a twist. When you think it's familiar, it probably is, so you've got to find a new way. But at least understand why you're tempted to use the cliché and the familiar story. The rules are there for a reason. Once you get over feeling confined by these rules, you'll be amazed at how freeing they are. True originality can't begin until you know what you're breaking away from. Summary. The topic of genre dictates the categorizing of movies. But instead of typical categories such as romantic comedy or heist movie, we've created 10 new ones that define story types. These categories are all you need for now to help you identify the story mechanics of the movie idea you're working on. You will not need to find exclusions to them. Or have I written those words prematurely? You're a screenwriter. And as I said in Chapter 1, all good screenwriters are bullheads. So I know what your response to the hard work and years of experience that went into what I've just related to you is. What about the exceptions? What about Breakfast Club? Huh? Is that rites of passage or institutionalized? Answer, institutionalized. Oh, yeah, well what about Train Man? Is that a Golden Fleece or a buddy love movie? Answer, buddy love. Okay smart guy, what about Ben Stiller's Zoolander? Answer, it's just a bad movie. Actually, it's one of my favorite bad movies. But it's also a great example of the superhero genre. If you're looking for the exceptions to the rules, you're missing the point of this chapter, which is to use categorizing as a storytelling tool. You must know movies. But you can't know them all. So this is a way to start. Take the script you're working on and try to find what category it's most like. Maybe you have moments in your script that borrow from all the categories. Maybe you start off your screenplay telling one type of story and end up telling another. That's fine, too. I mean, at the end of the day, I doubt you'll sell that script, but we all have to learn the hard way. We're screenwriters. Pain is the game. The point is to be well versed in the language, rhythm, and goals of the genre you're trying to move forward. If you know what genre you're in, learn its rules and find what's essential, you'll write a better and more satisfying movie. And have a better chance to sell it. What's so great about these genres is how inspiring they are, at least to me. Seeing these genres laid out, and seeing their heritage, often going back to very ancient and familiar tales, tells me that the job of Give Me the Same Thing, only different is not new. Jaws is just a retelling of the ancient Greek myth of the Minotaur or even the Dragon Slayer tales of the Middle Ages. Superman is just a modern Hercules. Road Trip is just an update of Chaucer's Canterbury Tales, isn't it? To not know the roots of the story you're trying to create, either from the last 2 years of movie storytelling or the last 1,000, is to not honor the traditions and fundamental goals of your job. Give Me the Same Thing. Only different then is what storytelling has always been about. But it's the way we put new twists on old tales, bring them up to date, and give them a spin that's meaningful for our contemporaries. It's a skill we must master and apply to all aspects of the craft. And in the next chapter, we'll discuss how to take all this wonderful background and draw out the most important part, the hero. Exercises. 1. Pick up the movie section of your newspaper. Review each of the movies available and decide what genre they fall into. If you go see that movie, compare and contrast it with the other movies in that genre. Were you drawn to it because of the type of movie it is? 2. Grab your handy TV guide and go to the movie loglines. Going down the list to check films you've seen, write what genre each falls into. Using the categories above, simply assign a number to each movie you've seen. Does it work? Does every movie listed fall into a genre? 3. For the movie ideal script you're working on now, decide what category it falls into. Then make a list of other movies in that genre. As homework, go to your local Blockbuster and see how many of these are available. Make notes about how they compare and contrast to each other. Can you better explain what type of movie your ideal finished script is part of? 4. Finally, For those of you who love to find exceptions to the rules, make up your own genre and give it a name. Find 3 other movies in that genre. Can you find 5? Maybe you've discovered a new genre. If you come up with a brand new genre category, use my email address found in the exercise section of Chapter 1 and send it to me. If it's really a good one, I may even include it in subsequent editions of this book.